let us concentrate on the Serbian laws. First of all, there is absolutely, and that is sure and certain, there is such thing as Serbian design or Serbian existential horizon. It is absolutely sure because there is the Serbian people. And having Serbian people, that means that there is such thing as Serbian design and Serbian existential horizon. As long as I know, there is no one who has dedicated to describe fully Serbian design with Heideggerian categories, but it is in some, up to some level the technical task. If we understand what we have said about knowledge, about design, about existential horizon, and knowing being in time of Heidegger, we could apply his categories, or he called that existentials, special categories to describe design. And it is technical task to apply that to Serbian design. In my book, in my second book on Heidegger, that is called Martin Heidegger, The Possibility of Russian Philosophy, I've made the same for Russian design. And I have arrived at the conclusion that designs are different, because Russian design appeared to have some different kind of existential. So they're based on the different structure of Russian existential horizon, and that is a kind of example. You could use that in order to repeat the same thing for the Serbian logos or Serbian design, in order to explore the possibility of Serbian philosophy, as long as I know there is no such kind of Serbian philosophy as something clear, complete. There are Serbian philosophers, but there is no such thing as Serbian philosophy, as well as Russian. There is no Russian philosophy. There are Russian philosophers, very brilliant or less brilliant, but there is no such kind as Russian philosophy. We started to create something like that at the end of the 19th century, many years after the existence of German and French and Latin and Greek philosopher, 1000 years after, and that was interrupted in our history with communists that have finished this process, and now we try to come back to the moment where we have stopped, and that is not yet success. We are still outside in Russian history, outside of the moment where the process of manifestation of Russian religious philosophy was interrupted. So, comparing with Serbia, maybe it could serve as example. So, I'm not sure whether there is such kind of serious efforts to create Serbian philosophy. It is always possible because there is that Serbian design. But to reveal it, to put it in the form of logos, it's not technical problem. We could technically approach to that, but to do that we need some genius, Serbian genius, and I am sure that it belongs to the present and the future, not to the past. In the past we have a kind of ground, philosophical ground, an existential ground, historical ground. So, but we could make a kind of short preliminary analysis of what is Serbian existential horizon. First of all, the first fact of the Serbian historical sequence is arrival of so-called unnamed prince to the Byzance, where he was accepted by the Byzantine emperor. The tradition says, affirms, that this unnamed unnamed prince was from White Serbia, that is identified somewhere in the north of the Eastern Europe. More or less, one of the theories that had something to do with Luzhitza, with Sorbs, with one of the Polabs tribes, Slav tribes, and the last traces of it are actual Luzhitz Serbs or Sorbs, Serbs and Sorbs with O. That's one of the theory, and so there is a kind of motherland, Serbian motherland, that is situated not in the Balkan but to the north of the Balkan. At the same time, there is the question of the Urheimat of Slavs, or motherland of Slavs, that is situated to the north of the Carpathian Mountain. So that was not original Serbian place, but the Proto-Slavs lived to the north of the Carpathian Mountains, in the space of the western Ukraine, actually, and there was as well situated White Croatia, and White Croats were near to that. And after expansion of the Slavs, the part of the Slavs migrated to the north of the Baltic states, and among the other Polab Slavs. They were the dominating population after 5th and 6th centuries of the coasts of the Baltic Sea. And one of these Polab tribes, Lutici, Bodrici and Luzhitani, are presumed to be Serbian ancestors. So that living to the west of all the other Polab tribes. And from there, this point, the ancestors of Serbs arrived to the Balkans, and after first settling to the east of Balkans, and after that Byzantine Empire granted the territories to the present day Serbia as a kind of territories in order to defend Byzantine Empire against Avar that have created their Khaganates in the Pannonia and the part of Romania and modern days Hungary. So that is conventional history. There are many alternative versions, but let us take that as something kind of orientation. So what is interesting, how was the name of the territory of Polabian Slavs? That was called the European Sarmatia, and that was dominated by the Sarmatian tribes. So that was the Slavs were very closely connected with Sarmatians, Iranian nomadic groups of population that occupied almost all Eastern Europe, but not in the, as population, but much more as a ruling class. And from these Sarmatian groups were created a kind of ruling class of Eastern European society that was afterwards developed this idea in Poland, who traced the roots of their aristocracy to the Sarmats, the same for Balts. And it seems when we study the type of this society of Polabian Slavs, that they were Turanian in our sense. They were very, very warrior. They had not so much developed peasantry. They had peasantry, but not so much developed. The major feature of the Polabian Slavs were precisely their warrior-like attitudes. They having the horses and the veneration of horses, and they were very, very independent. They couldn't tolerate any power above them, so they were Sarmatian type, Turanian type. They spoke Slavic languages, but with many Sarmatian features. We could not say nothing for sure about the balance between Sarmatian aristocracy and Slavic population, but the type of Polabian Slavs was Sarmatian and Turanian, with serious amount of aristocracy, of noblemen, warrior with horse, and that is Turanian type of society. What is interesting, that there was a difference between this Polabian type of Sarmatian Slavs and sclavins, the other Slavic group coming to the Eastern Balkan with Avars. There dominated more peasantry. So the Serbs coming to Balkans were the bearers of this Sarmatian spirit, and that affected Serbian identity. And after the peasantry was developed and Slavification of other Thracians and maybe pre-Thracians population was accomplished, because the territory where first Serbians settled in the Balkan, belonged before them to Thracians. And Thracian society was mixed between Indo-European, three functional Indo-European society, and the rests or traces of the pre-Indo-European peasantry belonging to the ancient civilization of Great Mother. So Serbs settled over this existential horizons, assimilated, affected, and finally created a special Serbian people. Serbian people with difference with Bulgarian peoples, precisely on Macedonians. The dominating concept, identity of the early Serbs was precisely this warrior type of human being. So peasantry was very secondary and wasn't dominated from in the beginning. And that is why special Serbian character was formed based on this Polabian Sarmatian type. So Serbs were considered as warrior first. So that was a kind of pre-Hajduk type. So small Serb of big Serbs, everybody was a knyaz. Little knyaz, small knyaz, big knyaz, and that was a kind of nomadic Iranian tradition, not having the great Tsardom, not letting the other rule over the other, and that was a kind of aristocratic society mixed with the previous population that was as well included in the Serbian society. So, but the balance, for example, in Russia, Russian society, peasant type is absolutely dominating. So that was the peasant society, and the tales and the folklores, and the story about bogatirs were based or on the peasants' figure, or they were of foreign origins. And so, for example, in Eastern Slavs, and above all in Russian society, there was not Slavic aristocracy. All Russian aristocracy was not of Slavic origins. They were Germans, they were maybe as well Sarmatians, but not Slavic. In Serbian case, it's not the case. There was many aristocracy families from very beginning. Not one, not only dynasty, but many other secondary, third way. So Up to the certain point, the Serbians were aristocracy, or considered themselves to be. The aristocracy is the image. If you are knyaz, so you behave like knyaz, so prince. So that is the kind of attitude, and that was dominating attitude. A similar situation was with Polish people, that everybody pretended to be szlachtic. So almost 1/3 of population was szlachtic, prince aristocracy, and in Russia, for example, there was less than 1% of population belonging to the aristocracy, and in Poland 1/3. So in Serbia, maybe like that, half of population were considered to be knyaz, small knyaz, aristocracy. But that is very important. That is warrior tradition of Sarmatian type. So that was a kind of a very important starting point for studying Serbian identity that we could identify, including in the 21st or 20th century. So that is the very, very stable tradition of Serbian psychology. And so when we have this time of society or existential horizon, it's very difficult to construct the state, because nobody wants to submit to the authority of the other. So everybody is its own authority, and there is no other authority. That is a kind of aristocratic anarchy in this kind of existential horizon. That is the feature of constant feature of Serbian history. The next element was the influence of the Byzantine culture. So Serbs were Christianized, living under protection of Byzance, and that was acceptance of the Christianity in the Eastern form. That was not so clear in the early phases, because there was no split before. When Serbs were Christianized, there was not clear difference between Orthodoxy and Catholicism, without unity. That was split later. But nevertheless, the dominant influence over Serbs were exercised by Byzance, and that's very important things. And that as well, we see that was in the beginning of the Balkan Serbia, and that is in the end now. So that is very stable factor, Christian Orthodox Byzantine tradition. But we have spoken yesterday that Byzantine tradition, Orthodoxy, is not only religious tradition, it is well cultural and political and social. So Serbs were integrated in the context of the Byzantine Empire, with Katekhon as the concept, and with the Patriarch as the head of the church, and as well popular Christianity that integrated pre-Christian tradition of the holidays, of the pre-Christian figures, in the context of Christian saints, festivals, and so on. So Christian, popular Slav, Serbian Christianity was not so much exclusive in front of the pre-Christian tradition, but inclusive. So Serbian Christianity included many pre-Christian type of tradition, the figures, Piatak, Nedelja, the saints, the Saint George, the Ilya prophets, as the figure of new name, or the Saint Nicholas, as the new name and new archetypes for pre-Christian, Indo-European patriarchal figures, mostly. So if we want to know pre-Christian Serbian tradition, it is not only folklore or folk songs or pagan myths that are conserved in the very small quantity, but the correct analysis of Serbian Christian tradition could say us much more about pre-Christian culture of Serbian people than, for example, reconstruction, artificial reconstruction, postmodern reconstruction of paganism. So if we want to understand what was before Christianity, we need to analyze Christianity, Serbian Christianity, and concentrate on the certain figures and festivals and tradition linked to the Serbian Christian saints and special days of the calendary and so on, because that was inclusive. But what was included? Precisely, we have already made analysis that was the one level of Indo-European patriarchal tradition that was linked with pre-Serbian Thracian existential horizon, but reinforced as well by first Serbs. They were bearers of the same pattern, of the same vertical structure. And in Greek Byzantine tradition, they have met with the very similar concept. And in Thracian tradition, very similar. In Roman tradition, in Hellenistic tradition, that was around Platonism that was all created. In pre-Christian Serbian, Christian Serbian, Thracians, Byzantine, Romans, so that was a kind of Indo-European level, but at the same time there was a pre-Indo-European, Palo-European tradition and existential horizon that was very powerful here, more powerful than in the north of Europe. So in the north of Europe, in the Polabian, White Serbia, and the motherland of Serbs, there were lesser elements of the matriarchal type, but they could exist from Tripolian Cucuteni culture, as the traces as well to the north and to the east, but in the lesser scale than in Balkans. So there was a kind of matriarchal dimension that was as well embedded in the newly created Serbian identity. So that was the motherland of the great, of the matriarchal civilization here in Balkan that was very, very strong. And that explains partly what Gasparini, Italian author, called Slavic matriarchy. There was not such kind of Slavic matriarchy, but influence of matriarchy in the Balkans was very strong and embedded in the Serbian tradition that was reflected in the Vila's history, in some gestalt, in some images of feminine images of the folk songs and folk tradition, or in the very ancient song of Skadar, of creation of Skadar, when the woman was blocked in the wall. So that was a region of the creation of the city. It is purely Sibylline story about creation of the city of Skadar. Very tragic, very romantic, but matriarchal. And that was not so much Sarmatian, White Serbian, that was Balkanic. And we have the exactly the same pattern in Romanian culture, Mastra Manole, with putting in the wall of the most beautiful church created in the Argeș in Carpathian mountain by Master Manole, who was obliged to put there his wife his wife that was as well pregnant as in the history of Skadar, in the Song of Skadar. So the idea is that some matriarchal aspects of very ancient Balkanic matriarchal civilization as well were, these elements were embedded in the existential horizon of Serbs, and we need measure this influence. It is not, we could not say for sure how deep this influence was. So it is certainly that there was such influence. It was reflected, mirrored in the Serbian peasantry, peasant tradition, on the some level, not in the whole tradition, because that was male tradition, that was based on the heavy plow that could be managed only by men, laborers, but there were many traditions that linked woman with earth, with the crop, with laboring earth, that we need to identify more in order to have a concrete picture or image of this deepest level of Serbian identity. So that was a kind of preliminary analysis of the Serbian design. But the new edition of this design begins with Nemanja dynasty. That was a kind as well Christianization was made in the context of the Great Moravia and Cyril and Methodius tradition. So that was already something Slavic in all that. So you have Serbian have received Christian tradition in the Cyrillic, in the Slavic way. And that was very important step, because that was, in the religious sense, linked to Bulgarian initiative to organize the special kind of Slavic Christian church, so-called Sixth Patriarchy, declared by the Bulgarians in order to have independence and autonomy for Slavic Christianity. And that was the claim to create first Slavic Patriarchy, independent in the first Bulgarian kingdoms after Christianization. So Serbs were in the same field, conceptual field, acceptance of the Orthodoxy, of Christianity, but in the Slavic form, with Church Slavonic, that was unique Bulgarian language, that was elaborated in the Great Moravia, accepted in Bulgaria and in Russia. So Church Slavonic language is not Russian, not Serbian, it's much more Bulgarian, or it is considered to be one of the special South Slavic language, Church Slavonic. But what is important? So Serbs were integrated in the Christian society not only with Byzantine domination, but as well in the Slavic context. And that was fully developed with Nemanja dynasty. So that was a kind of idea that now it is a time, and that was Eragnis, that was event in Serbian history. Now it is a time with Nemanja to create Serbian kingdom in the full Byzantine sense, repeating up to the same time Bulgarian example, because the Bulgarians were the first to claim Slavic kingdom and Slavic special autonomous church. So that was the kind of heritage of Bulgarian heritage, with in the competition a little bit with Bulgarians, but at the same time as something that is continuation of the same. The Great Moravia was lost for Orthodoxy and for Slavic special tradition. And the time of Russia didn't come, or Romania. So there were two pretenders to create some independent Slavic Christianity in Byzantine sense. And now it appears clearly how important the concept of kingdom and all that was. Because Byzantine means a kind of empire. So they should be based on that symphonic relation between the king, sacred king, and the patriarch, or the head of the church. So that was first made by Bulgarians in the first and the second Bulgarian kingdom, but with Nemanja and with Saint Sava, that was repeated in the Serbian case. So creation of Serbian kingdom and Serbian Patriarchy in Pech was the same event as acceptance of the Katekhonic mission. So that first the claim to be Katechon was made by Bulgarians and Macedonians, the same space, and with Nemanja there was second claim. So the creation of Serbian state was preparation to take the heritage of the Byzantians, of the Byzance, and replace the mission of Katechon from universality of Byzantine Empire to Slavic world. And there was the Bulgarian pretenders to it and Serbia. In certain moment, Bulgarians were dominating, and the Serbs were in the periphery of this. And with Nemanja there is a kind of growth and rise of this Serbian Katekhonic tradition that has affected absolutely Serbian identity in the next period. So, but this Katekhonic tradition, based on the symphony of between Serbian Tsar, Serbian king, and Serbian patriarch, with seventh patriarchy, Serbian at this time, that was claim of Byzantine heritage. So we could say that Raska and the rise of Raska was a kind of third role. Before that was Veliki Ternava in the second Bulgarian and Veliki Preslav, third role, and now it is Raska, third role. It was second claim in the Slavic space, existential space, to receive Byzantine Orthodox mission. So that was the concept: Serbs, Serbian state, Serbian church, Serbian patriarchy as Katechon. It is completely, that was a kind already of form of Serbian logos, because tradition, all Christian tradition, and the links and ties of Saint Sava with Mount Athos, with all the monks' tradition and metaphysical tradition of spiritual, mystical orthodoxy, was brought to the Serbia and was put in the center of the Enlightenment, Serbian Christian Orthodox Katekhonic Enlightenment, linked with the concept of the kingdom, sacred Serbian kingdom. It was considered in the Nemania's time already as proto-empire, Serbian empire, that should include the world in it, because the Katekhonic tradition is the fight, as we have explained, against Antichrist. So that was the mission, Apollonian Dionysian mission of the Tsar, but by extension of the people. So Tsar church and people formed the Katekhonic unity. And a kind of logical tool, philosophical tool for that was the Byzantine tradition that included as Christianity the pre-Christian way of thinking, and that was organization of the first and I would say greatest form of Serbian laws. So with Nemanja, Saint Sava, Patriarchy of Pech, that were laid the foundation of Serbian laws. That is Serbian identity, where existential horizon and Serbian design has reached its height. So we could not imagine nothing comparable, nothing similar in all Serbian history. So that was a kind of highest point. So where the immanent Serbian design has created a Serbian logos in the state, in the Serbian religious tradition with Saint Sava, and Serbian people as Katekhonic people with the mission to fight against darkness, with Tsar, with kings, with in the favor of Christianity, and that Serbian mission was for it. So Serbs essentially are this. Serbs are bearers of that Serbian logos formed and explicitly manifested in a time of Nemanja dynasty from very beginning. From very beginning. And that was the claim as well that opposed Serbian messianic and Katekhonic expectations to Bulgarians. Bulgarians, because that was not opposition, they were kind of competitors, because they had very similar post-Byzantine as well Slavic, as well Orthodox, as well Katekhonic identity. So that was the roots of competition of two greatest Balkanic Slavic people, two of Katekhonic society with the independent from Byzance kingdom and political state, and independent up to the certain point of church organization. That was prefiguration of Great Russia, of Third Rome, because there were two examples of something that was repeated in the 4th century of Russia, but that was made before us. So the claim of Bulgarians and Serbs to be Katekhonic Slavic people with eschatological mission in the fight or in the war of light against the forces of darkness, defending Katechon, that was much earlier than a Russian claim of the same. The Russia maybe made more spectacular success in that, coming to the world power, but ideology was very, very similar or just the same. So Raska Third Rome is the concept of translation of empire, repetition of Bulgarian example, but at the end of the Byzantine history, in the 15th century, there appeared a kind of hate of this process, and highest point, and that was Dushan the Strong. Dushan the Strong created the real empire that controlled almost all Balkans territory, the major part of Greece, and that was spatial and political space where this mission has obtained its concrete limits. So that was the greater Serbian empire that was made. It lasted not too long, but that was including the Mount Athos was under control of Serbian kings. So in the time of Dushan the Strong, there was a kind of concrete realization of this messianic tradition with the Raska in the center and with very weak at that time Bulgaria. So the Bulgaria wasn't a kind of alternative to that. So that was the highest point, the rise of Nemanja and the highest point of this locus. So the locus was formed in the intellectual, spiritual, religious time in the beginning of Nemanja and has reached its full special manifestation in the space, in the concrete reality, in the politics, in the time of Dushan the Strong. So all this Nemanja period was the period of the birth and development and the maturation of the Serbian logos. So the real Serbians lives in that period. That is a kind of archetype. So to be Serb is to belong to this point of history. As for us, to be Russian, that means to belong to even the terrible time. So that was the height of our historical, spiritual and political and cultural achievement. So Serbian logos is located there in time and in space. So there is the Serbian, greater Serbian space, and there is greater Serbian time, because the logos in Byzantine and Slavic Christian historical situation was formed. So everything we have there and then is purely Serbian in any sense. Everything that existed before Nemanja was a kind of introduction. Everything that existed after Dushan the Strong were kind of echo, resounding of that. So continuation, kind of consequences. So that is the center of Serbian history and the highest point of Serbian logos. After that was the very quick decline of that and the growth of Ottoman Empire. And the next point was the Kosovo battle, where the future of Katekhon was decided. And the song of Kosovo battle, the song of King Lazar in the Vuk Karadžić text book is very revealing. So I remind you know better than everybody else that that was a kind of choice in front of King Lazar, or to have Carstvo Nebesko, heavenly kingdom, or to win at the Kosovo battle and to have Carstvo Zemeljska, earthly kingdom. In both cases, he should fight. In both cases, the Serbs should come to the Kosovo battle and should participate. And every family that declined to be there are damned. That was the damnation of the King Lazar. So everybody should defend the logos, but decision and the choice was or to lose the earthly battle and to win the battle of light, but fighting strongly and dying at the Kosovo, field, or to have the victory but to lose the fight for the light. That is Iranian tradition, that the force and the army of light is weak. Because sometimes there is a time to light to win and darkness to overcome, and the light, the army of light, has special limitations. It could not accept the weapon of the darkness. It could not betray its holy nature and holy essence, and that are limitations, because the devil and the darkness has no rule. It could easily overcome the measure. It is hubris, titanic forces. And the army of light has its rule. So you could not win at the price, at any price. You should stay with Christ, with verticality up to the end. And that was the choice of the King Lazar. And decision was made. I will go to fight against the Ottomans. I accept the loss, and I'm sacrificing myself and my people in order to have heavenly kingdom. So that was the decision of the hero of light. That was a kind of transcendentalization of the Nemanici kingdom and empire, and obtaining post-human, post-mortem dimension of the Serbian logos. So that was the pure martyrdom and pure sacrifice of all Serbian people in order to come to heavenly kingdom. So that was not the loss, that was the greatest victory, that was reflection of traditional Sarmatian ethics. To die in the battle in order to be immortal, to die in order to be immortal, to die in order to win, to come, it is better to be defeated with Christ than to win with the Satan. That was the main lesson of Kosovo battle. And everybody, at the same time, when we read, it is absolutely amazing, when we are reading the song of the Kosovo battle, there was not glorification only of humility of Serbs, but the greatest braveness. So they fought up to the end. They destroyed everything they could, including the chief of the Ottoman army. So that was heroic battle. The battle was very serious, but decision was made beforehand. That was the purely Christian, purely Sarmatian, purely Indo-European decision. Decision, and not something casual, not defeat in front of the material force and power. So that is the kind of assumption of Serbia, and passing from the earthly Serbia to heavenly Serbia. And that was accomplishing of Katekhonical mission. So that was defiant against Antichrist, and that was defeat. And there came the end. So after that, the next period of Serbian history was to be in hell and to conserve identity in hell, not betrayed, not converting in Islam, not accepting the rules of dominating power, but conserve its Nemanja identity, its profound identity, its Christian, Orthodox, Slavic identity, with all the suffering. That was the history of suffering, on being in the historical hell for centuries. So that is very dramatic, and that was. But that, what is important? That was not meaningless. That was continuation and a consequence of the greatest, the period of greatness, a new test, divine test for Serbian people, and creation of the introduction of resurrection. That was a dying process in order to resurrect. That was not meaningless suffering, that was meaningful, that was completely meaningful suffering. That was eschatological test in order to resurrect, resurrection of Serbian logos. The next moment in the Serbian logos was precisely the moment when the opportunity to liberate Serbian people from Ottoman control came. That was new challenge to Serbian logos. And what Serbs did in that situation? There was one part of tradition, there was a kind of monarchistic, imperial, Orthodox, Serbian, patriotic, archaic. So they conserved the elements of the real and profound Serbian logos that was in direct connection with the Serbian design itself, the core of its design. Because there was a kind of Orthodox Serbian conservative imperialist tradition, imperial tradition, that continued to be present in the end of the Ottoman rule. And that was the very great inspiration. That was in all the Serbian people. And in the part of Serbian aristocracy. There appeared Obrenović and Karageorgievich trying to manifest, to incorporate this spirit and this identity in order to restore Serbian kingdom, greater Serbia, with Orthodox Serb identity, with logos, following Nemanja example as kind of resurrection of the Serbian logos after dramatical period of suffering. But the time where this appears, when Ottoman Empire was destroyed, there was very special. That was modern time, where the Sibylline logos dominated, and where the West already was under full domination of this modern world vision, where there was no place for such kind as Apollonian logos, Christian tradition, empire, kingdom, warrior heroic values. All that was discredited and destroyed in the West. So the Western power fighting against Ottoman tried to use this will of the Serbian people to restore its identity as a tool in order to destroy Ottoman Empire that was traditional, to destroy Austrian Empire, and to block Russian expansion in the Balkan. So they tried to use, they have organized Masonic structure in Serbia, they made education of the Serbian nationalist and the republican spirit, and they tried as well to enter in this process of liberation in order to propose their vision, nationalist vision, third political theory, liberal vision, first political theory, and after with Tito and the other second political theory. All three political theories were a kind of the network, mreža, network put over Serbian identity, but with no connection. That was the kind of suffocating network, in order not to reveal it in a proper sense and to deviate Serbian energy and Katekhonic revival in the other sense. But there was a kind of many logoses in that Serbian liberation. There was inner, profound Nemanici Katekhonic identity, the pure Serbian logos. There was Western European influence. There was Russian pragmatic or Orthodox imperialism logos, very friendly, by maybe pragmatical reasons, by some affinity of Third Rome and Raska, Third Rome, Moscow, Third Rome, Raska, Third Rome, with the same opposition against the Western power. There was a kind of different form of what I'm calling archaeo-modernity. So modernity is not modernity as in the West. In the West there was tradition, and diminishing of tradition was the growth of modernity. So or modernity or tradition. But archaeo-modernity, it is where tradition and modernity coexisted in the very bad and sick way. So logical, or you have something or you have something opposite, or you for tradition or for modernity. That was the case for the Western Europe. But for Russia, for example, or for Serbia, there was archaeo-modernity. You are in the same time for modernity, modernization, and at the same time for archaic roots. So that created a kind of schizophrenic society. Purely, the Russian type is, after Peter the Great, is purely archaeo-modern, schizophrenic. And I presume that something like that was producing here. So Serbian logos was after the end, to the end of the Ottoman Empire, was schizophrenic, archaeo-modern, where legitimate claim to restore Serbian logos were mixed with modernist, republican, liberal, socialist and nationalist tradition. They block both, because they are two logos. Modernity is the logos of Cybele, and inner Serbian logos is the logos of Apollo and the logos of Dionysus. So that was noological, deep noological contradiction that wasn't remarked, wasn't accepted as such, wasn't cured, and that created sick society. Because archaeo-modern is sick society. That is the case for many other societies, but the difference between the Western society and the archaeo-modern society precisely is that in Europe, modernity entered in the society in the logical way, in the following Aristotelian logic, or modernity or tradition. If you have something modern in that place, you shouldn't have something traditional. So you destroy, for example, monarchy, you install republic. And that was the same, or church or atheism. In archaeo-modern society, atheism and church, republic and the kingdom, tradition and modernity coexist in a very bad way, without remarking each other. That creates a double interpretational reading. So everything is double. It is purely bipolar disease, because you see something, you interpret it in two contradictory ways at the same time. So there is democracy or no democracy? Democracy and dictatorship is the same. So that is a kind, not of Dionysian, that is what we have called, according to Gilles Verdurin, mystical nocturne. So you see one thing, you call it completely with different name. So that is schizophrenic attitude, because that is split of personality. And in Western Europe, there was a clear personality. Or you accept modernity or you accept tradition. In our society, it was archaeo-modernity. So you accept both. Serbian logos and liberalism or communism or nationalism that belong to completely different context, without noticing it. That's very important. Without noticing it. It is not conscious lie. It is inconscious lie. Consciously we lie when we know the truth and we hide the truth. But unconscious lie when we don't know the truth and don't care about it. So we are lying just because not having any interest to the truth at all. So that is archaeomodernity, and I presume that to the end of the Ottoman Empire, in the beginning of the independence of modern day Serbia, was precisely this element, this mixture between Chetniki, between communists, between liberals, between Masons, between traditionalists, between Orthodox popes, and all that, this mixture was completely archaeomodern, with no clearly defined line of division. But that was creating of the Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia had two contradictory readings in the same first Yugoslavia. Serbs, majority of the Serbs have seen in that restoration of the greater Serbia, and that was to the end of the Karageorgievich rule that has produced the reactions of everybody else, above all reaction of Croats, because that was a kind of how the Serbs saw the Yugoslavia. That was the rule of Serbs, the recreation of the greater Serbia and return to the Dushan the Strong new situation, but at the same time that was republic with completely modernist ideology, with balance of the interests and bourgeois type in the center. So the materialistic and commercial and egoistic elements were dominated in the nationalist or liberal sense. That was the archaeo-modern mixture of the society, and that was the reason of misunderstanding of the components of the Yugoslavia. There was not internationalism, that was not purely liberalism, that was not empire, that was not confederation, that was something archaeo-modern, and any Pole in early Yugoslavia had its own reading of what is going on. So for the Serbs that was the victory, and as well for the maybe radical Chetniks that was the kind of return to the roots, that was the kind of accomplishment of the mission of Katekhonic tradition, of Katekhonic mission. For the other, that was the conventional, purely multinational confederation organized by purely pragmatical, materialistic bourgeois reasons. So there was the multiplicity of the reading of the Yugoslavia. There was the end with German occupation. And the fight of two powers, communists, partisan, and Chetnik, and monarchist partisans. That was where the future of Yugoslavia after the Second World War defined in this fight, and the victory of the Soviet Union of the Nazi regime was the reason why second political theory dominated in Eastern Europe and in the part in Yugoslavia as well. So the new Yugoslavia was based on the second political theory, but at the same time that was the new reading of what is Yugoslavia, with the Marxism completely strange to the concrete development of rural peasant Serbian society with archaic tradition, with partly modernized cities, and that was the new kind of archaeo-modernity, where the pure form of the Serbian logos was prohibited. So that was put out, or that was considered to be dissident, and Chetnik were persecuted as counter-revolutionary tendency. So the pure Orthodox version of Serbian logos was prohibited. There was a kind of domination of the second political theory, Marxism, civilian, absolutely civilian, and that was a kind of new Yugoslavia. But when the second political theory began to shake in the Soviet Union, that was as well that affected Yugoslavia, and with Milosevic has reappeared Serbian version, reading of Yugoslavia. So that was a kind of nationalistic reaction, not clear philosophically, not explained, but intuitively that was the fight, Serbian fight for Yugoslavia, was the fight for this Katekhonic reading of Serbian state. That was as well the last greatness of fight of the Serb for Republika Srpska, for Srpska Krajina, Kninska Krajina, Slavonia, Baranya, and Western Srem, and all these, and in the last moment, the fight for Kosovo against Albanians. So there was the Serbs with Milosevic considered Yugoslavia as Katekhonic entity, unconsciously, without saying it clearly, without explaining that, but and saying that with a very awkward language, trying to adjust this to communist, to nationalist agenda, to Western liberals. So that was archaeo-modern version of Serbian logos, and that was defeated. And this time, but as any defeat of this kind of logos, that has something positive inside. So as the Kosovo, the fight of Kosovo, that is the fight for the light. In any Serbian hero that has given his life to the defense of Yugoslavia, that they have sacrificed their life for the case of this logos of light, for the deeply Katekhonic mission. In their case, there was no convention. That was the mistake. That was the clear breakthrough to the reality of the Serbian identity. So they have invested the blood and life in this Serbian identity, and that could not vanish without a trace. That was continuation of the Kosovo battle. That was continuation of the Serbian ways through the history, and that was preparation for the future, for real eschatological, catechonical Serbian future. After that, with the betrayal of Russia, that has betrayed itself in the 90s and afterwards, there was a kind of actual moment of Serbian state. That was defeat, recognized by society, by state, by Serbian people. But so Russia could not be a kind of real alternative to modernization, to westernization. There is the first political theory that dominates now in purely civilian sense. It's clear. But where is now the Serbian logos? I presume that he is here. He is in Serbian people, in Serbian identity, in Serbian space, in Serbian culture, and having received this defeat should be first of all understood and deciphered, should be interpreted correctly in order to go further in the Serbian history, because now the problem that we are facing with Serbian logos is almost the same that we have with the other form of Apollonian logos and Dionysian in the Apollonian Dionysian sense. So there is the huge planetarian fight that is lost almost by everybody. Maybe we Russians have the image that we resist still, or Syrian or Iranian still resist, or some other form, but domination of the force that have has overcome Serbian fight, it is not only the West or United States, it's something deeper. So, and in that situation, it is not, I would say, it should not be reason for despair, because the force of the Sibyl or return of the Great Mother is as a kind of coming of Antichrist or liberation of the Satan from the abyss, and that was planned, that was let to happen by God, and that is the final test. And I think that concerning Serbian Logos, now is the moment not to blame the state or the society or Russian or Western to do what they do, but to concentrate precisely on the cultivation of this Logos instead of everything, because it is planned test, maybe last one, maybe not, maybe there will be, there will be one more test, but one more fight, one more chance, as you have as Serbs, two chances: creation of first Yugoslavia and fight of Milosevic. And nationalist review. Both chances were lost, both. But maybe there will be the new one. And if there is the living tradition, if there is living Serbian design, it could make a kind of analysis of why that was lost, how we should not repeat the error of the other, how defend the pure form of Serbian Logos against this attack, because nothing has ended yet. So when the Serbs are, there is Serbian design, there is Serbian state, that's already something. Maybe it's a little bit awkward, just an actual situation, but it is. And that is very important. That is already something to seize as opportunity, not as response, not as an answer, but as something that is positive, as positive Serbian value, Serbian people, Serbian tradition, Serbian culture, Serbian heritage, Serbian state, Serbian church, Serbian Christian church. So we have many things now, and because there is a spiritual fight, not material, it has no comparison with material aspects. All that is secondary. If we fight the spiritual battle, we win everything. If we could win one Serbian heart, we could win everything. The fight is over, and that is the victory. So that is the fight for human, that is going inhuman, that is not material atomic confrontation between the masses of matter. There is the human spirit, and the fight is inside of us, and the Logos is inside of us. It's not something that is imposed on us from outside. So we are the Logos, and Logos acts through us, and Serbian Logos acts and lives through Serbs as everlasting, or maybe not everlasting, lasting continuity up to the end of time. So I think that Serbian people was chosen in order to keep its identity up to the end of time and to reappear in the last moment of the history on the side of God and Christ and Logos of Apollo and this verticality in order to participate in the general, universal Kosovo battle or create the universal empire of light, empire of Christ, whose prefiguration was the kingdom of Nemanici and Dushan the Strong. So that is more or less my exposition of Serbian Logos. And we could say as well that Yugoslavia and modern-day Serbia were and are simulacrum of real Serbia, it's clear. But simulacrum is as archaeomodernity. It's partly archaic and partly perverted and caricatural. So we need to solve the problem of simulacrum and restore the authenticity and the pure state on what is not simulacrum and that is hiding behind simulacrum. So we need to deduce the grain of truth from that. So now we could make pitany or comments or some.
Sad zanima me četvrta politička teorija. Kako sad mi četvrtu političku teoriju, koje su inovacije u četvrtoj političkoj teoriji koje bi mi eto ostavili neko u meni oduševljenje koje bi ja prihvatio i koje bi eto tako u ovom slučaju Srbije, Makedonije, jer mi smo tu u Balkanu. Koje su inovacije u četvrtoj političkoj teoriji? Koje su nešto, neka novina, nešto što bi promenilo neke stvari, što bi...
First of all, fourth political theory is rejection of three political theories. It is very important, because when we try to criticize modernity or liberalism, we are falling immediately in communism and fascism, or communism and nationalism. So, and fourth political theory, it's invitation to avoid this trap, not to fall into it. But at the same time, that is the criticism of modernity in politics. So if we regard modernity in the politics as something we reject, we put over, we discover two dimension of the past, of the pre-modern. So we could use the pre-modern values as positive one. Now it is prohibited. For example, yesterday Marine Le Pen, Jean-Marie Le Pen, the French nationalist, has spoken in the interview in the French, very, very famous today in the social media, social network. And he said, it hurts that France is not more French, there are no more French people, there are some other people. And for me, it's a tragedy. And the journalist has asked, maybe that is evolution. Maybe that is evolution. So the modernity always use that. You say something is going wrong. Maybe that is evolution. Well, we are losing our country. Maybe that is evolution because it knew. So in all modern concepts, in all three political theory, that is the decisive argument. So when we are still in the first, second and third political theory, if someone would demonstrate that that is evolution, that is iPhone 7 Plus, so we are completely disarmed. Oh, we should accept that as the decisive argument. That is new, that is evolution. Fourth political theory says that is no argument at all. So that is no argument. All three political theory, communism, liberalism, nationalism, they fight what is more modern, what is more effective, what is more technologically progressive. But fourth political theory says it is not an argument. If you say that church belongs to the past, there's no argument that we shouldn't defend the church. So we discover the values that modernity think to be completely lost, belonging to the past. We say no, they belong to eternity, and that means to present. So we discover something as existing that we were obliged to think that we have lost forever. So that is new dimension of the life of the values, of the relations that modernity obliges us to think as belonging or non-existing, because the past in the modernity, political modernity, doesn't exist. But in the first political theory, the past exists. Not all past, but what was being, what was authentic, exists. So the church doesn't belong to the past, it belongs to the eternity. So we strongly believe in the eternity of God and the church. And that opens new horizons, because we could deal with the traditional values not of something that we remember, but something that we redefine. It is completely new. At the same time, I think that so we could discover and deal with our logos as if it is present, and that is absolutely new. So that is not remembrance, that is not recall. And I think that for Macedonia, for Bulgaria, for Serbia, first political theory is the only way to reaffirm its deep identity and to fight for the place in the future. It is not the fight for the past, it's the fight for the future. Because in the three political theory, and above all in the first political theory, we are doomed, because we will become the part of the globalist liberal space with no identity. So accepting liberalism, we accept our death immediately, theoretically and practically. When we say yes to liberalism, and that is something that is the modernity, we accept that we have no possibility to resurrect. That is the death without resurrection, without hope. So we are doomed immediately. But when we start to react, we are falling into the nationalism or communism immediately. When we criticize liberalism, capitalism, the West, we say, oh, that Stalin was good, that Hitler was good, Milosevic was good, or nationalism was good, and so on. And so we give them the tool to win us once more, because we accept the rules of the modernity. And first political theory invites to reject all the rules of modernity. So no argument in the Enlightenment sense, no argument of modernity is not any more valid. So that is the force, if you want, of the Islam that rejects everything of the modernity, still insisting on its own value. In one way or other way, in Shia way this is good one, or in the Salafi way this is bad one. But the problem that Shia tradition has nothing to do with modernity. And the Iranian people defend eschatologically Shia tradition up to the end, without hearing what the Westerners say, trying to create Iranian and Shia future. It is not the case for all Iranian society, but for ruling elite. We could create Orthodox, hierarchical, traditional, with strong family, with patriarchal relations in the family, with the friendship between men and women based on the Christian values, as the future project. That is unimaginable in modernity. So we have no right to think in that way. We could not. We have no right to speak about that, because that belongs to past. It's not evolution. That is not new enough. It is all old form of iPhone. So we are defending something completely crazy in their eyes. But what they defend, what they try to do in our eyes, is completely perverted. So for example, Muslim. Actually, they go the right way. They say, your arguments, all your arguments of West are not valid. So we are opening the door for our understanding. of the life of the man of the future. So we should do the same in the context of Christian, Orthodox, Slav tradition. And that is absolutely new. So it is not the past. It is something that is more postmodern than any postmodern philosophy. So we should first think differently, choose differently, and not be afraid to affirm this identity, this kind of discourse against everything. So, and then we will find that majority is on our side. The majority of our people, of Russian people, of Eastern people, and the Western people, because now we see that the majority of European rejects the liberal tendency. They could not find the way to express themselves, and that is why forced political theory is translated in all European languages, in all, with no help from us. That they make that by themselves. It's not promoting, for example. We don't pay nothing. We don't suggest that. We don't push it. Everybody understands that they need new approach, and in the three political theory that is impossible. This new approach is impossible because it always will come to the same liberalism finally by one or the other way. And that's interesting that in the United States forced political theory is prohibited in Amazon with no reason at all. There is no hatred, nothing. It is, you could treat it in Serbian. It is prohibited. That is considered to be, I'm considered to be most dangerous philosopher in the world, because that is a kind of challenging their consensus, liberal modern consensus, without playing their game in communist or nationalist critics. So I think that forced political theory is the future, is the possible future that is the ontological future, that the future that could be and could and should have the relations with being. That is not the time. Being and something that is the origin and the source of time. So that is, and that is why I don't want to show, to be a kind of publicity for false political theory. It will solve one problem, that problem will feed the starving, will promote the progress. No, not at all. That's much more important. Open this ontological dimension of the future, to put the time and the future aspect of time in the contact with being. That is precisely the goal of forced political theory, and I'm absolutely almost sure that is the same as the will of the Serbian people. That is the logic of the Serbian history and Bulgarian history, and the history of what is human in us. Human, because now we are in front of the total dehumanization, and that is declared already openly. Kurt Schreiber, Elon Musk, they say we need to replace the human by artificial intelligence, and that is evolution. If you are against, so why not? That's evolution. No French in France, it's evolution. No human more, but it's evolution. And that is logic of modernity that we need to stop as such. Not say, oh, better conserve us as human as well, beside this artificial intelligence. Better to frame, to control development of artificial intelligence. It's impossible. We need or overthrow, whether overthrow everything or accept the final metaphysical defeat. Forced political theory is invitation not to accept defeat metaphysically and to fight against all that. So not only part, not only this point, this dimension, fight for our identity, for our logos, as it is, as it was, as it should be in the future.
So just one quick thing. So interestingly enough, Mein Kampf is fully available on Amazon in multiple editions, and your book is not. So
absolutely interesting. In America.
Yeah. So this all seems really, what you said, enticing. For political theory is an alternative. But what keeps coming to my mind is that liberalism is so coherent and so entwined, and it pervades every facet of life. So you eat McDonald's, you drink Coca-Cola, you find your companion via Tinder or some dating app or speed dating. You work in a company in Serbia, then you are transferred to work in Mozambique, etc. So it's everything is global, individual, progressive, etc. So and we still live in a world of states. So if we imagine Russia as an embodiment of Katekhonic, if it isn't now. So if you reintroduce this metaphysical Apollonian logos, will it have a reflection on the economy? So will it necessarily change the division of labor in a sense, and making the country less economically developed, which means that it can foster a smaller and less effective army, which means that it will lose in a fight between with a liberal state, which is technologically, economically more advanced and can quite plainly field more troops. This is kind of a trap. So in order to defeat a modernistic country and a modernistic West, you need to have an efficient economy, which I do not see how it can function with this kind of metaphysical logos which we're espousing here. For me, it seems that it will necessarily lead back to traditional pastoral life, which will then be defeated because it cannot field a strong state and a strong army. So, can you address this?
But there are two answers. First of all, the answer of St. Lazar. So we are preferring heavenly kingdom at any price, and we will fight against them, including if we are doomed. So that is Serbian answer, by the way. So the next answer, more pragmatical, if we affirm the values as a kind of horizon of the future, our values, our logos, so we could use pragmatically some form of technology, but only in defensive way. That was more or less the way of Russia, trying to defensive modernization. For example, Peter the Great has opened the window to the west in order to show their cannons. So we have opened the windows, put the cannons, and start to start fire. Shoot. So it is the decision, but that is very, very dangerous because the technological development is not neutral. So we are accepting the logos of Sibylle, accepting this kind of competition, or we're accepting the rule of the enemy. So the enemy comes in us. So normal economy could be only agricultural and pastoral economy. Economy when you produce and consume at the same time, and when the rest, for example, are or destroyed in the orgy or brachina or some festival, or is given to church, to God, or to the noble aristocracy. They defend you, they kill the enemies. So there is a kind of balanced economy with no development, because there is no idea to grow. The idea is to preserve, to produce and consume and be the balance. So if no growth, that is the happiness. So no growth, no fall. So and the split between consumer and producer, division of labor, that was the split of economy itself. That was the kind of asymmetric, tragical, dramatic economy that has created the differences, inequalities, and capitalism. So this system should be destroyed absolutely at the end of the day. But how to destroy it. If we return personally for small agricultural communities, not enough. But if we try to reconstruct our society, putting the peasant as the symbol, as a positive figure, trying to restore integrity, not divide more and more labor, trying to put together, trying to recreate integrity, the concept of integrity worker, but still, for defensive reason, using in some way techniques. For example, there are spies who for example, who pretend to be the other. They have the mask. They are trained. Our spies, Russian spies, for example, they are Russian. They are they are fighting for our cause, but they pretend to be Germans or Americans and so on. They have masks. We should use technical development precisely for that reason, but they should have very strong identity, stronger than normal people. So if you are dealing with the Sibily or technical or modern economy or something, or modern state, you should be twice or thrice more Serbian, so you can overcome that. If you are weak, you should labor the earth. So it is a kind of challenge for Dionysian aspects, to come down to the hell. For example, we normally we steal the technological plans. In Russian history, we didn't create many things, we have stolen them from the West, and after that used against our enemies. So you could make everything, because it is not, there is no ethics. They are evil, and we should fight the evil, taking all opportunities that we have. But the main orientation of the society should be changed from the beginning. So we could preserve some special zones in the society as kind of dangerous zone where only spies could come in, with the people with very hard identity that will be not affected by the poison of the technology, of economy. So they should be agents dealing in Dionysian way in the world of the hell, because the modern state, modern economy, modern commerce is a hell, spiritually speaking. So that is more or less second pragmatical question. But if we will be obliged to choose, and that was the choice of the Michael Paleologus, when he has concluded alliance with Catholicism, and all the fathers, Christian fathers, priests were against that, and he has invited them and said, how you will resist against possible Sicilian aggression, what kind of force you have to oppose to them. Or I will conclude the pact with Pope of Rome, betraying Christianity, Orthodox Christianity, or you will show me where are your army, how we resist the possible and very probable aggression. And priests have responded, no, we have no force, we hope God only, and He will help us if we be true to our Christianity, Orthodox Christian Church. And Michael Paleologus has preferred to conclude the pact. He was not convinced by that, and that was politically correct. That was the kind of success. But there was so much protest after his death to bury him in the Constantinople that he was hidden from the people, because his act that was successful politically was considered to be betrayal of the Christian Orthodox identity. So that is spiritual choice. If we really believe in God and the Spirit, and if it does matter for us, maybe we could prefer in some situation to lose the battle than to betray our identity. But that is always as well the proportions. So we could not solve this situation a priori. When we are inside of it, we could understand how difficult to take decision, how it is existential decision. So, and as well, for example, we are now in Russia, we are defending our sovereignty at any price. This is very good, but we are losing our identity at the same time. And what is the use of the sovereignty without identity? So the balance, it's very good to have sovereignty and identity in order to defend identity. But if you insist too much on sovereignty, it serves for no purpose. So there is no people anymore, because there is completely destroyed, degraded, almost dying spiritually and mentally, mass of schizophrenia. That is now Russian people, Russian society. And in that case, you could maybe prefer to be invaded in order to be awakened. Because now there is a kind of sleep, dogmatical sleep of Russian society with some success of Russian state. So it is hard to say, because better to have sovereignty, identity and prosperity, economical, but in the reality you always should choose between the choice, real choice is difficult one. That is a kind of existential challenge to us. Okay.
I would just your remark about the army and about fight between unequal. If we take the Serbian design as something heroic, patriotic, and throughout the history there were very many brave men and very many strategic warriors in our country, in our battles, which are now studied throughout Western academies, military academies. And if we compare the concept of courage, which is introduced recently in Serbia, so the most courageous cop of the year, 2 years ago, in Serbian police forces was the guy who publicly admitted that he is gay. So the concept of courage is really disturbed, and if the concept of courage is disturbed, there is no army.
Okay, that's pretty fine. So just follow up on what you said. So I talked with Axel yesterday when I said that we were the children of Sibelius. So it turns out I was wrong. He pointed out something to me. So he basically said that the Serbian peasants were Apollonic, basically, because when the Ottomans came in, they took the cities over, then the Christians migrated from the cities to the semi-Christianized villages, and even if they were Sibelian, eventually they became more Apollonic in nature. That's why we have Saint Sava, who is worn on the flags. You have Karađorđe, who is an Apollonic figure, and so could the solution basically be that all of us, I mean, whoever harbors this Apollonic logos, should just basically live within this Sibelian-dominated world and wait until it collapses in of itself, as the Ottoman Empire eventually became the sick man in the Balkans, on the Bosphorus, sorry. So is that just the answer? So just keep to yourself, preserve your identity, and wait until Sibelia collapses under the weight of its own corruption?
So it could be a solution, but because first of all, preserve identity. But it is not. Nobody will let us alone. Nobody will give us this peaceful opportunity to do so. So they will attack us inside, outside, every minute. So in order to keep the identity, we should fight against. So, but I agree. The most important situation. But what is most important, what you have said, now situation is not propice, not ready, or not so dramatical to do absolutely something with politics, or because the situation, we could not solve easily the problem we have. The civilian world is attacking us, but is decaying as well as liberalism. And the most important thing, to establish alternative, establish based on identity, establish it. It is not the time to speak about what we are going to do, because we are not yet present fully. So there is nobody to suggest, because everything that will react now, it will be prematurely. It could be a simulacrum as well. So if we try to react now, before establishing full identity, full logos, before coming to ourselves, it could be a kind of new simulacrum. We will only give to the enemy new power, and that is the problem. Too early. Antichrist arrives too early, before Christ. So that is we need to wait up to the right moment, but to wait, it is to fight. Wait is create, resist, be active in the right way. First of all, in intellectual way, in the kind of network, cultivating mind, spirit, returning to tradition, trying to put with us, to the church, to our roots, to our history, to our spirit, trying to our culture, to our knowledge of the history, trying to invite the other around us, the families, the friends, everybody, by the means we have, big, small, or great. So, and established position. We could not now, seriously, we could not speak about the fight against this civilian logos. We need to ground ourselves, to gain the ground, the space for us, because we don't exist in Amazon. My books don't exist. We need to insist on that. So they think we shouldn't exist, and if they pretend we are not here, Serbs should not, evolution. So they should be replaced by someone else, but still existing. It's the heroic act as bearers of this identity. So defend identity, cultivate identity, establish intellectual activity inside of this identity. So and that is the kind of conservation, and as well that is awakening of the logos. So it is most important activity than any else. So and that the measure of this activity is inner, spiritual, and that was the essence and the source of logos of Apollo. So it is inner spiritual heaven that we have inside of our history, inside of our identity, Slavic identity, Orthodox Christian identity, and Serbian identity. So we could make a kind of break.